review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She is a debut author, and the title of the book, Strong, a relationship field guide for the modern man, no other than Miss Kristal DeSantis.
Hello.
Welcome to Book 101, Miss Crystal, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Sure. Yes. Thank you for having me, Daniel. I'm excited to be here. So I'm Kristal DeSantis, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I live in Austin, Texas. And yeah, this is my first book. I'm excited to talk about it.
Awesome. Awesome. Congratulations. And thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world. What motivated you to write The Strong specifically for the modern man?
Yeah. So, as a marriage and family therapist, one thing I found is there are a lot of mental health books written for women. There are a lot of relationship resources, blogs, books, podcasts that are targeted to help women in relationships. And when I was working with couples, what I found was that there was a bit of an imbalance in the resources available to women compared to the resources that were available to men. So I wanted to just balance things out a little bit and make a book or write a book for men um, that was kind of a summary, a field guide to the relationship science that obviously I learned as a marriage and family therapist, and that I wanted to share with men to help them be successful in their relationships.
Awesome. Again, thank you so much for balancing the world itself. Thank you. So, can you explain what you mean by a relationship field guide?
Sure. Yeah, I found that, there was a lot of confusion for people when it came to what is a healthy relationship, right? And like everybody wants to find love, everybody wants to find happiness in relationships, but there wasn't really a clear idea of what that actually meant or what that actually looked like or what was a good plan to get there. There was often people kind of saying like, well, if you love each other, it should just work out, right? Or um, and I just, that's not true. So what I wanted to do is write a book that kind of can give people a blueprint, and especially for men, because one of the things that I learned in working with men is, men want tools, they want skills, they want a plan. Um, and so that kind of speaking that language of where is a blueprint of what does a healthy relationship look like? What are the essential elements? How do you build from the beginning and a strong foundation and then build the whole strong house of a healthy relationship? How do you do that? And so that's really what I wanted to do is kind of break down. So this book, it's called Strong, and each of the letters, STRONG, represents a pillar of a strong, healthy relationship. So these are the essential elements based on science, based on research, based on everything that the data shows makes for a healthy relationship. So that's where it kind of, it's not the last book you ever have to read on relationships, but it might be the first book that you need to read. So then you can go, dig from there.
Definitely. Totally agree with you, Miss Crystal. What do you think are the biggest challenges men face in relationships today?
Well, a big challenge is that the world today is different, um, and it's changed very quickly, right? So in past generations, men were often taught that women want you for your financial provision. Women want you because they need physical protection. And women obviously want you because, if a woman wants to have babies, then they got to have a man, right? And so there were these
Yes.
very kind of practical aspects that men were raised to understand was their value in relationships, right? Is like, have a good job, be physically fit and then be able to give your wife babies if she wants them. But a lot of that has changed. I mean, not saying that women don't still like, a man who is fit or a man who has a job, but there are a lot more, uh, there's just a lot more that goes into making a relationship work. Emotional skills, self-awareness, the ability to have conflict and communicate well. And so there's just a lot more that goes into what does it mean to have a healthy modern relationship. And I think that's where women have been getting that message for a long time, women, you need to process your trauma, you need to think about your attachment styles, you need to think about communicating about your emotions and your feelings. But men were not getting that same message, and I think that's where I was seeing a big divide when it came to men and women, especially when they would come to therapy. So almost like speaking two different languages.
So, Miss Crystal, how is it strong different from other relationship advice books aimed at men?
First of all, there are not that many relationship advice books aimed at men, so maybe that's something different. This is,
True.
one. Um, and I think also the way I talk about this and what makes it different than other relationship books for men is I don't really focus so much on the dating aspect. There are a lot of books out there, a lot by men to help other men, kind of be successful in dating, like here's how to get a woman. But my aspect or my, conversation in my book is, well, what do you do when you get one? Right? It's like things don't end when you say I do. That's just the beginning of your life together. Like, how do you keep it going? How do you make it successful? Um, and so that's really where I focus on is, how do you not just uh, not how do you get the girl, but how do you keep the girl? And how do you keep your family
Certainly.
together? Yeah.
Being faithful people. So, what role does emotional intelligence play in building strong relationships, according to your book?
So it really is part of the foundation of a healthy relationship, right? It's like a certain level of self awareness, understanding what your emotional needs are. One thing I found is that, we often don't encourage men to talk about emotional needs, which sometimes men, they just then, how can you can't get good at something if you don't practice it. And if you deny that you have emotions, then you're not going to get more skilled at expressing yourself. And so that's where the emotional intelligence piece really comes in is, a relationship, there's going to be there has to be intimate connection. And a lot of that is being able to have emotional conversations, being able to be attuned to your partner's emotional needs, being able to be aware of your own emotional needs. Um, and so, yeah, emotional intelligence is everything. I mean, even now, thankfully, there's conversations around that when you talk about business leadership, right? You can't be a leader if you're not emotionally attuned to your staff or your business. And it's the same thing in a family, right? You cannot be a good leader if you're not emotionally attuned to the needs of your family. So emotional intelligence is really crucial when it comes to leadership. And so that's also what I wanted to kind of speak to that man who says, I want to be the leader of my family. I want to be the person who helps my family feel safe and provides emotional protection for them. And emotional security. Like, I want to be the dad that my kids come to and they feel safe talking to me. Well, that takes emotional intelligence, right?
Certainly. Are there specific habits or mindsets you recommend men develop to be better partners?
Yeah, there are a couple of things I talk about in my book, and there's let's see, there's a few skills, but one big one is the skill of self-regulation. You know, when you are upset, and we all get upset, right? We have stressful days, we sit in traffic, we, forget our coffee or we spill, like something happens that irritates you, gets you upset. The skill of being able to self-regulate, take yourself from a place of irritation back to a state of calm is one of the most crucial skills when it comes to bringing stability to your family. and bringing stability and calm and peace to your home, right? Especially if you've got kids, right? Kids can be, screaming, yelling, jumping off the couches. And you're like, if you get upset and you get upset with the kids, it becomes a cycle that, I've seen so many times it causes conflict, and the mom comes in and she's like, stop yelling at the kids. And then you start yelling at each other and it's a whole mess, right? So the ability to self-regulate, and there's grounding exercises, there's physical exercise, there's just taking care of, are you sleeping well? Are you eating well? And then do you know how to calm your body when you're getting activated, when you're starting to get irritated, so you don't explode, right? Because that's sometimes the pattern I saw with a lot of men is they're fine, they're fine, they're fine, they're fine, they're fine until they explode. And so really being able to kind of catch it sooner, being able to know what your emotional and your mental health or your relational needs are, what your physical needs are, so that you can bring yourself back to a place of calm and regulation so that you can be a strong but safe presence in your family.
Very well said, Miss Crystal. Very well said. You talk about the modern man. How has the definition of masculinity evolved in your opinion?
You know, I think it's an evolving conversation. Um, that's a big conversation right now, where some of the maybe markers of masculinity are being challenged by some men who don't want to necessarily feel like they have to fit into a certain box, right? And so there are more men exploring more freedom, right? And so I think right now masculinity, or the definition of masculinity, is really just it's in a transitional stage. It's really in flux. It's really in an exploration stage, which I love and I'm all about, because I want men to feel empowered to inhabit whatever version of masculinity feels empowering to them, right? And for a lot of young modern men, the version of masculinity that feels empowering to them is not the version of their father's masculinity. It's not their grandfather's masculinity. And so really just, sending that message that, hey, with the evolution of the modern man, the definition of modern masculinity is also changing, because the world is changing, because the needs of our people, of relationships, are changing. And maybe your grandfather's or your father's masculinity is not going to be your masculinity, and that's okay, right?
Yes, totally agree, Miss Crystal. So, how do you encourage vulnerability without compromising a man's sense of strength?
Ooh, this is a really good one. Vulnerability is actually it, it's so interesting how it gets conflated with like weakness, because
Yes.
vulnerability is a very courageous thing. Like, it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. It takes a lot of courage to say, hey, I'm struggling, I need help. That takes so much courage. If that's not, like, in no definition is that weak, right? So vulnerability, being able to say, hey, I could use some help here, is is a very brave and very courageous thing to do. And so really that's and of course, the big, I think, fear for a lot of men is that, well, if I'm vulnerable, what if I get made fun of, right? What if somebody's like, you need help? What kind of man are you? Right? Or that their partner or somebody will disrespect the vulnerability that they've shared, right? Which is absolutely a real fear, which is part of where that emotional intelligence comes in, of recognizing who is a safe person to share your vulnerability with, and who might not be a safe person to share your vulnerability with, right? Who can you trust? Learning all of that. Um, and then also, again, reframing for yourself that vulnerability, it gives people a way to connect with you, right? So it's almost like the opposite of vulnerability is armor. You can't connect with armor, right? Vulnerability is showing people that you are human. But again, you want to make sure that you show that humanity to people who also will honor that humanity, right?
Certainly, too much ego of men sometimes. They don't like asking for help. They think it's a part of their weakness. So, Miss Crystal, how important is communication and relationship dynamics you describe?
Oof. Communication is everything, right? I mean, this is as a marriage and family therapist, this is one of the main things that people come into therapy. They say, we're having trouble communicating, right? And these might be people that are, they have good jobs, they have no problem communicating, but it's that emotional communication, right? It's the vulnerable communication. Um, and that's really where, at the end of the day, people just want to feel heard. They want to feel understood. They want to feel like their partner cares. And so that's the kind of communication that I help people have through therapy. And also in the book, I talk about the skills to how do you make sure you have a level of communication that brings you closer to connection. And it's not just about who's right and who's wrong.
So, Miss Crystal, as a debut author, what would be your short-term and long-term goals in writing?
So, I want to spread the message of this book. I want to get it out there. I want people to find it helpful. I'm also, applying or I'm talking about it with other therapists. I'm doing trainings on this model. And, maybe eventually one day I'll write a second book for women. Maybe that'll be
Oh,
the next one.
nice. Nice. Good luck to your goal, Miss Crystal, and looking forward for more and more empowering books like this to come. So, what would be your advice for those people out there suffering from ego, especially for men?
You know, I would ask, is your ego getting you closer to the life you want to live or not? Or is it keeping you disconnected from the love you want, the life you want, the happiness you want? And, you know, again, if it feels too scary to go and talk to a therapist or to give it up right away, it's like, well, maybe start small. Start by reading a book, right? Just see if anything in
Yes,
there resonates with you. See if you can start, practicing some skills, because I also understand, right? It's not just ego. Men want to feel competent, right? They want to feel like they're good at something. And so, it's scary to kind of throw yourself into something new without any skills and tools. So, you know, think about it and you start looking at some skills and tools, practicing them on your own so that you can then practice with your partner.
definitely. Thank you for your advice, Miss Crystal. So, is Strong a book that men should read alone, or could couples benefit from reading it together?
Oh, absolutely. Couples can definitely read it together. I also have it on audio on Audible. So, they can listen to it in the car, they can talk about it. Because I've also had women read it and it helps them understand also a little bit more of the male perspective. And so that can also help with empathy and understanding as well.
What role do respect and boundaries play in maintaining healthy relationships, according to your guide?
Yeah, so that's the R, right? Is R, respecting boundaries, but also starting with self-respect, right? Um, Being able to feel proud of the person that you are in relationship, being able to respect how you're showing up as a partner, as a parent, as a person. All of those things also just help with your own mental state, right? It helps with self-esteem. When you feel good about yourself, you generally show up in the world a little bit better. So having boundaries, which again, not a lot of men have been taught that they have boundaries or they how to set boundaries. And so I do talk about that when it comes to respect. You got to respect yourself, you got to respect your needs. And then you and your partner together have mutual respect and shared boundaries.
Respect begets respect, people. So, Miss
Mm-hmm.
Crystal, how do you hope readers will feed after finishing strong, empowered, challenged, reflective?
Um, I think all three. I would love for them to feel all three, right? It's like reflecting
Yes.
on maybe the old scripts that they've had and where they can, be challenged to learn new things, but also empowered to actually make the change.
Certainly. So, Miss Crystal, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to one of my audiobooks. People, audiobooks available on Audible. Of course, my Book 101 Review Volume 3 suggestions. My Book 101 Review 2 selected and Book 101 Review Volume 1 highly recommended. They are my first season, people. First season. My labor for my first season. Of course, my one of my self-help book, Threads of Existence, Weaving the Tapestry of Life, and Stand Tall, Stand Together, Breaking the Chains of Bullying, and Life is Too Short, a journey of discovery and fulfillment and joy. And my climate change book, Earth Fever, The Unraveling Climate, and Our Race to Restore Balance, available on Audible and one of the best sellers. So please do listen to them because they're one of, I think, the best. One of the best. So, Miss Crystal, are you planning any follow up books or workshops based on the principles in Strong?
Um, I do I do trainings for therapists right now on this model, um, and so and I'm preparing a couple of different public speeches on this model. So I think that's the next. And then if somebody is in Texas or in Austin, they can work with me on this model. Or feel free, people. Even if you're not in Texas or in Austin, or even in the U.S., you can always reach out to me, and I will share. I have a free download on my website, strong.love, where there's a little kind of mini workbook so that you can practice some of the principles in this book for yourself.
Certainly, Miss Kristal DeSantis. Thank you so much for sharing your daddy book to the world. And as I said, we are looking for more and more and more books or empowering books to come. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your book strong?
Yes, absolutely. Please, if you're interested, go to Amazon, Audible, or my website, strong.love. You can also follow me on Instagram at ATXTherapist. And I would love it if you would support my work. And then, yeah, we can build a new world with better relationships.
Definitely. I hope it will become a course too. So strong about course that will empower the world. So Miss Kristal DeSantis, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This has been great.
Yes, and people, please support Miss Kristal DeSantis because if you support her, as I said, more and more and more empowering books like this to come. Who knows? It will become a course someday. So, Miss Kristal, as I said, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.